Hello to all my dear friends. I am
Ami Nadalatapur from Aminovid's channel.
I hope you are well. According to your requests, this tutorial, unlike previous tutorials, is a complete tutorial of modeling, texturing, light and animation. In this tutorial, I am going to tell you how I made this scene, and completed it by creating textures and lighting materials. And in the end, I animated it.
Before we go to the training, the sponsor of this episode is the FlexClip website. FlexClip is an AI-powered video editor that makes creating professional quality videos easy for beginners, with advanced features and a vast library of royalty-free media, and 40% off discount for students. Let's start.
Well, first, as you can see, this shape is like a cylinder. After this, I select the first part of the cylinder. Now I click on the cylinder and click on the Object tab from the Attributes section, and change the size of the radius, height and number of segments. The cross section of my object needs to be rounded, so I check Fillet and increase the number of segments. I apply changes similar to what I see in the original image. I think it was much better, and it was similar to what we saw in the picture. To create these two objects that are on the cross section, it is enough to create two tubes and change their size. After creating them, it is enough to take a copy and move it to the other side of the created cylinder. Now I will select all of them together and group them together and rename them. To create this cross section that protrudes from the cylinder, I select a rectangle and change its size. And check the rounding box so that the corners are rounded. In order for my rectangle to have thickness, it is enough to select the sweep and place a circle, and the rectangle itself under it. Now I will group these two objects together, and take a duplicate of it and change their names according to the picture. I move the object a little and make the size of the cylinder smaller. Now, in order to make the bottom shape, it is enough to pull out the cylinders that I created from the groups. And put them together in the same group. In order to do this better, I will hide the objects that I don't need for the time being. And I will also remove the rectangle that we made from one of the groups. to use for this object. As you can see, I am resizing it to look like the image we see. I move the objects to move according to the figure. To create pages on the rollers, it is enough to use the line. So for now I hide the lower object to create the page on the upper object.
As you can see, I drew the line with two breaks, and when I'm done, I click on its points and use my chamfer to round the corners. I use extrude to thicken the spline and change it. Because my screen is thick, it is enough to use cloud surface. Not having a segmentation on the screen will be a problem for us, so I'm using remesh to create quad segments on the screen.
If you want to have the adhesion between the cylinder and the plate created physically, it is enough to use collagen and find the cylinders where the plates collide. And drag and drop them in the collagen object tab. After finishing this work, I will come and put the objects that were above in a group named up to create the bottom object surface, just like the top object. It is enough to first rotate it like in the picture. Now use the spline and draw the line by creating 2 full breaks. And round it in the corners using the chamfer tool. Now, to make this spline thicker, it is enough to take a copy of the steps we did for the top page, and just move the spline. Don't forget that in order for the collation function to work correctly for the bottom screen, we have to move the cylinders in the bottom part as well. Choose the camera and close the frame I want. I come from the Object section and set its type to parallel. I try to make sure that my image does not have any defect, and if there is any, I will fix it. I use the Actin rendering engine to render this scene, and it doesn't matter what rendering engine you use, because the path is the same, and it's just possible that the points and nodes that I use have different names in different engines. I click on this option and I see my rendering window is active, and I set the direct lighting to the racing background. I set the number of samples to 200, just to see what is happening. I will increase it at the end. In order to make no changes to the rendering frame I closed when I'm moving around my scene, it's enough to select a view, for example the top view, and make it custom for me. Now I have two views for myself and one view, which is my main view. Now I can see every change I make on my scene live in the rendering view I closed. If you have seen in the main picture, there are several plans behind, whose task is to create a wall. So I will do this using several plans. When adding material and lighting to the scene, make sure that there is no extra light or extra material inside your scene, and that it is completely your scene, and a clean scene without any light. First, I will create this material on the cylinder, which has a glassy blue grading. I choose a specular material and add it to my cylinder. I enter the material editor node. I increase the amount of roughness of my material and give it a noise texture from the texture section. At the same time, you can see the changes on my rendering window, how it is done. Now, in order for this glass material of mine to get color, it is enough to come from the transmission node and give it a gradient. It is enough to bring the color of the gradient that I have close to the blue that I want, and to see that break and that border in my gradient. It is enough to click on the linear and change its type from the shading part that I have. Now with the changes on the transform that I create for it, I can reach my desired material. I used the material I made for the cylinder for my other 3 cylinders. For the material of these lines that protrude from the cylinders, as you can see, one material is different from the other. That's why I take a copy of the material that I created and go to the 90th part of the material. And move the colors of the gradient. Now I have 2 different materials. For the bottom line, as you can see, it has a glass state, and there is no color inside, so I create a material for it. If we want a logo or writing to be placed on our object in alpha form, it is enough to create a material for it. That's why I created the word Aminovids as a PNG in Photoshop, as you can see, and from the material section, I choose a diffuse material, and from the node opacity I create a texture image, and I add the alpha map I created earlier to it. If there is a problem with the placement of your alpha material, it is enough to use the node transform part of the material editor. For example, if I rotate it 90 degrees, it will be fixed. It depends on you what changes you want to make. For the pages, we can see that it has a matte glass state. That's why I use a specular material and raise it up a bit. If you see in the original image, we have a series of horizontal lines on the pages, and now I have already done this in Photoshop. I made a series of black and white lines in a map form, and I add them to Rapunzel. As you can see, it needs to be rotated 90 degrees to be in the right direction. Come close. Dear friends, the amount of runnis or the type of pages all depends on your taste, and how much you want to change. Now, the solution that I considered was like this. You can create your own desired material. In order to have the UI on the pages like the image, we act like the previous step. When we created the alpha map, I create a diffuse material and give it this texture from the opacity part. I also hit the invert tick to have a completely alpha, and as you can see, I still have a rotation problem. So I have to rotate it 90 degrees from the transform node. I can also color from the diffuse part. I can change this texture so I can even use a gradient and have a color function. For the bottom screen, I add this glass material. And for the alpha material, it is enough to click on its texture, and click invert to create the opposite state. Now, I can also change the diffuse neck to my liking in the main picture. If you look carefully, you can see that a shadow from a window is placed on the wall. This type of lighting is called gobos. Gobos are done using black and white shaders. For this part 1, add a texture to my light. And from this part 1, give it a black and white shader. Now, by moving the cross section of the light, I reach my desired light, so that there is no disturbing light in the image. I use in tree. I give a black and white shader to the tree texture, and make the necessary changes. As you can see in the picture, a light line has been created on the cross-section of the cylinders, a light similar to a rim light. To create this type, it is enough to make the cross-section of the light small and stretch it according to what I do. Be sure to use backlight and side lights for lighting. To animate the pages, it is enough to go to the alpha textures that we used as UI, and give TX keyframe in the transform section. Give a penalty for the bottom texture, in the opposite direction of the top texture.
Thank you very much for being with me until the end of this video. I am surprised by your support during this time, and I hope my channel will respond to your love. Thank yourself for learning a new lesson today. If you like the video, subscribe me and introduce the channel to your friends.
Like و سابسکرایب یادتون نره. مرسی.